When I was praying into what this message was supposed to be about, it's kind of interesting because I was thinking about sharing all of these things that I'm really excited about, and I hope all of y'all are really excited about, and wanting everybody to get excited about going and being in India and doing all these different things. And it just kind of hit my heart that sometimes when we talk about all this like exciting stuff that the Lord is doing, the tendency is not to get empowered, but it's to get overwhelmed. And I felt like the Lord was just wanting to release a word that activated with peace and with purpose, instead of with an anxiety that goes like, what is my part in this? What am I supposed to do? And start this like rambling rampage of not knowing how to engage with things. Because that's how my mind works. It's like, it'll go like 5,000 miles a minute whenever I get inspired, and then it's sometimes actually hard to step out and do that first thing. And my brother and I had been talking about, he had watched this, I think it was a TED Talk video on like knowing your why. And he was talking about like that just being so important. And he had kind of just gotten this new understanding of it being so important to know what your why is and to understand why you're doing what you're doing and what's causing you to step into that. Because if you know your why, then everything else kind of follows it. And I was thinking about how like that's sort of what we're all looking for in our lives. And it can cause some of that anxiety even, because we're like, what is my main thing? Like, what is my purpose, my complete calling, that thing that I'm going to be able to do for the rest of my life, and everything else is going to fall behind. And if you've ever been a part of a business or an organization or a church, most of the time those things are going to look for like a mission statement and say, this is it. Like this one line encompasses everything that we're trying to do. Last year, you'll probably remember, some of you that were here, we went to Haiti with an organization called Core Love. And they explained this in such a cool way, where they would tell all of their volunteers, leaders, staff, everything, that they were a ship. And their mission was to defend the orphan. So they were in Haiti doing orphan care. And they said, that's the front of the ship. And we steer towards that because we know that's what God's called us to do, is defend the orphan. And then everything else happens after that. And they do a lot. They do so many things. They do trainings, they do feeding programs, they do education, they do empowerment, they do all of this stuff, but they just say all the time, but our purpose is defending the orphan because that's what God's called us to do. Then everything else kind of falls with that. And so we try and do that for ourselves in our lives. And I have done, let me think how many different things. I've done like the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finders. I have a book of prophetic words, like all of these things that are almost like this big giant puzzle trying to say, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do? And I think a lot of us have some collection of that. We have things people have spoken over us and things that we've learned about ourselves. And we're trying to solve this question of what is our purpose? What are we actually like trying to do? And I was thinking about like, sometimes you go in a grocery store and you're there and you have something you're going to buy, but then you like throw all these other things in your shopping cart and then you leave and you're like, I didn't even buy the thing that I was going to buy. Or it's even worse, you like get on Facebook to respond to a message and then all of a sudden you're like looking through photos and doing this and that and all over, and now you're on Instagram and you're scrolling through like Discover, and then you're looking at meals, and then you're saving meals and you're going out to buy the meals, and you never responded to the message that you first got on to respond to. And a lot of times us like trying to find our purpose is sort of like that, where we're like, okay, it's this, and then we get distracted with all these other things, and we're so confused and wrapped up into it, and it's not clear. And at this point, you're probably thinking, I'm more confused than I was when you started talking. But hopefully this is going to help. So my brother and I were talking about this question of what is your why, and the importance of knowing your why so you don't get lost in the grocery store or get lost trying to follow Jesus. And I just looked at God and I was like, Jesus, what was your why? And I love that we get to do that. Like we just get to straight up ask Jesus, like, what do you think of this? And we get to hear answers, and it kind of quiets everything else. It quiets every other voice that we've heard and every other thing that we've thought. And then immediately the verse came to me, and it was John 10:10 that says, I have come so that you may have life and you may have it abundantly. And I preached this whole sermon in my head to myself about that verse that said, I've come that you can have life and have it abundantly. And I was like, well, that's it. That's what I'm here to do. Like, I'm here to bring life, and I'm here to bring hope. And everything was that simple. And then I decided to do this word study because I realized that a lot of times when Jesus spoke, he used that same phrasing. And he said, I have come to do this. And it's so clear that he's speaking on his purpose. And he's actually not saying this is who I am. And he's not saying these are all of the extra things that are kind of come with that. Because so much more comes with it. Like, he never says, I came to bring peace. He actually says, I didn't come to bring peace. But we know that peace follows him. And we know love follows him. We know restoration follows him. But it helps to hear Jesus' words when he says, I have come for this exact purpose. So I did a word study through all 4 Gospels, and I just looked for every time the word come was used in that context. So it's used in a lot of other contexts. It's used to say, come after me. It's used to say, that you've come for this or that. But when he says, I came to do this, it said about him a lot. But I looked for every time that Jesus, in his own words, says, I have come for this. And here's what's cool. He only says it 12 times. Unless I missed one, which is possible, so check me because it's not hard to look this up, but he only says it 12 times, and I was like, wow, imagine that we can take all of the confusion about our calling and our purpose and who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to accomplish in our lives and look at 12 things that Jesus said that he came to do and know that he said, now come after me and follow me, and know that what he came to do is also what we're here to do. So I want to go through those with y'all because there's not a lot of them. And I think we can just look at them, and I'm going to talk about a few of them, but also, again, preaching sermons to yourself works really well. So one of these hits you, just download to yourself, hear from the Lord, what's God saying to me about this? The first one is Matthew 5:17, and these are very, very, very brief, imperfect summaries. So if you guys would write down these verses and go back and read them in context, I think you would get a lot from it. But the first one says to fulfill the law and prophets. The second is to call sinners. And this is where he says he didn't come to bring peace, but he came to bring a sword. Definitely going to pause on this one for a moment because my last one here is to disrupt families, which is for sure an imperfect explanation of what Jesus is talking about there. But I was thinking back on Shane's message a couple weeks ago that was here, and he talked about how we're not supposed to live out what our past generations were living out. We're not supposed to be in that same bondage and be in that same places of hurt and of not being free. And this verse it talks about in Matthew 10. Awesome, thank you. 10:30. We can get 34 also. It says, do not come to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. And then 35 says, for I've come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And it goes on to say other parts of the family that are actually going to become against each other because of the decision to follow Jesus. And in Jesus' time, what was happening was people didn't know him, and then one member of the family was coming to know him, and it was the rest of the family was going, what are you doing? This isn't how we live. And Jesus is still calling us to do that. He's still calling us to be like, yeah, I know my whole family struggles with addiction, but I don't. And he's coming to say, I know my whole family is struggled with marriages, but mine is going to stay strong and it's going to last. And I know that there's been sicknesses and disease that have been passed down through our biologically, but it stops with me. And when Jesus says he's coming to disrupt families, or when I say that, because those are my words, that's what it is us being able to change that. If we can go to the next slide. He says he came to serve and give his life as ransom, to go and preach, to bring fire, amen, to do the will of the one who sent him. You can go to the next one. We're just going to read through these. So the blind will see, and those who see will be blind. As a light, so no one who believes should stay in darkness. I'm going to skip that last one. So that they may have life and have it more abundantly, which is the one I started with in this whole search. And then to save the world, which I love that Jesus is just like, here to save the world. That's it. It's that simple. And I think it's cool because also the reason that Jesus is using the word come is because that was the context that people were thinking in. In Luke 7:20, I think we have that one too. John the Baptist had been prophesying that Jesus was going to come. And so then Jesus shows up on the scene and he's doing all these miracles. And John says to some of his disciples, okay, go and ask them this question. So when the men came to him, these are John the Baptist's disciples, they said, John the Baptist has sent us to you saying, are you the coming one, or do we look for another? So that was how they were thinking. There's one who's coming. We know this. What is he here to, what's he gonna look like? What's he gonna do? And so that Jesus comes and he uses that dialogue that they're already thinking in to then rewire what they think he's supposed to do. And a lot of times the phrasing is exactly the same if you go back and you look at these phrases. And he said, I did not come to do this. I came to do this. And he's reshaping how you think. And I felt like this morning that that's what Jesus wanted to do, was say, actually, you're not here to do this. You're here to do this. You're here to do these things. And there's so much more. Like, this is me taking one way that Jesus said it. You know, he also said that he was sent to do a lot of things, and you could probably do a similar like word study on the word sent and get more things to add to that. But the outcome would be primarily the same. It would be that we're here to be a light and to save the world, to heal the sick. Then these things are our calling. These things are our purpose. And we have so many other things that we'll do. We will preach. We will prophesy. We'll be teachers, we'll be dancers, we'll be communicators, we'll do all of these things, but those things will not be our purpose. Those things will be the tools that we fulfill our purpose through. And that is so important to know. And that all of those other things actually just sometimes serve to confuse us of who we are and if we're doing enough. I love Kenneth always shares, man, he's not in here either. He is here. Kenneth always shares about his work that he does with the homeless community, that it's the dream of God that he never knew that he had. And I love it because if Kenneth were only trying to fit the path that he's had prophetic words for and that he saw himself doing since he was a kid and that other people have told him he was supposed to do, he never would have ended up there. But Kenneth has this heart that's just open, that's just, I want to lay down my life because I came to serve, because I came to be a light, because I came to save the world. And that brought him to serving the homeless in Houston and making huge impact. And he wouldn't have ever gotten there if he was locked on the things, but instead he was locked on the purpose. He knew that why. I love that about Kenneth. It's awesome. I'm going to read a quote to you guys. It's by David Foster Wallace, if anyone knows who that is. But it says, "It's what makes room for the universe inside you. All the endless, inbent fractals of connection and symphonies of different voices, the infinities you can never show another soul, and you think it makes you a fraud. The tiny fraction anyone else ever sees. Of course you're a fraud. Of course what people see is never you, and of course you know this, and of course you try to manage what part they see if you know it's only a part. Who wouldn't? It's called free will. But at the same time, it's why it feels so good to break down and cry in front of others, or to laugh or speak in tongues or chant in Bengali. It's not English anymore. It's not getting squeezed through any hole." I loved this quote because it's talking about the complexity of you as a person. And we are here trying to find that one line that says, this is who I am, this is my full calling, this is my whole purpose. And anyone who's actually done that probably feels like a fraud, because they know actually that's not everything. You are a labyrinth. Like, you're a maze of things. You have so much complexity and so many different things that you're capable of and things that you're called to in different seasons and that you're going to do. And if any of those are your purpose, then you're limiting yourself to just that, and that's all it's ever going to be. But when you know your purpose is to save the world, to be a light, to lay down your life, to go and preach, and that is what you're headed after, that's what you're steering your ship towards, then you're free to have all of those intricacies and let them flow out of your life in the places and the times and the seasons that there's going to come. And there's not pressure. If you have a call to be a worship leader, but you're not singing right now, that doesn't mean you're not fulfilling your purpose. That's something that is coming. That's something that's going to flow out of you because the Lord wants to use it, but it's not why he brought you here. It's not why you're a part of this family. I want to go back to that list because we kind of skimmed through it, and I just have some notes on what does that mean for us. So it says that we're to fulfill the law and the prophets. And like we were just talking about, what the prophets prophesied, and they prophesied other things as well, but one of the main things they prophesied was someone was coming. And so just by coming, Jesus fulfilled the prophets. And if we will just go, if we will just come, if we will just show up and say we're here, we're fulfilling the prophecy. We're fulfilling that we are here to bring heaven to earth. For 2, I put, don't just be friends with Christians. He said, I was not called. This is one of those that's a paradigm shift. I was not called for the righteous. I was called for the sinners. And we get to be for the sinner when we just don't stay right here in our family, but we are friends, like genuinely friends, connect with, spend time with people that don't know Jesus. For 3 and 4, we kind of talked about this, but he says, I came to bring a sword. And then again, that's in context with family. And I think part of what he's saying here is to not be afraid to confront things, not be afraid to have conversations that need to be had, not be afraid to stand up for what you know, like the Lord has called you to and what he said in your life, and then to break free and to heal from the things that have plagued your family and plagued your generations. Go and preach. So this is the fun one because this is where a lot of those things get to come in, like the different giftings, the different things that have been spoken over us. We get to use those here. The distinction is, if you're called to dance, then that's you preaching. But your purpose is preaching. Your purpose is bringing the gospel. And you keep that in mind, and then it flows out through these different giftings and these different things that you do. So he says to go and preach. Then you just say, okay, Lord, where? Where are we going? And if it's the grocery store, that's a great starting spot. Even to dance, why not? Oh, I want to share a story with this one. Oh, wait, 6, give up your life. No, I'm off. Sorry, to go and preach. Okay, no, 7, yep. So I want to tell a story with this one really quick. So our Angolan young adults have a really cool testimony with this that is unfolding right now that I'm really excited to see what happens with them. Julio Hueveras, this man, he a few months ago gathered everybody together on a Sunday after church, and he said, I've had a vision. We've been praying for each other, and I pray for you, and you fall down and feel the Holy Spirit, and then you pray for me, and I fall down and feel the Holy Spirit, and then I stand back up, and I pray for you, and we're just praying right here, and we're just exchanging fire among us. And then he said, so I know that it's time that we take that somewhere. We go somewhere else with it, because we're not just supposed to share it right here, or our fire's going to burn out. And he said, we're all talking and like praying about it and getting excited, and they asked, okay, Sarah, find a place for us to go. And so I prayed, and then I was like, well, we could do this trip. And last year we had a couple from Harrisburg that have an amazing ministry in Harrisburg that were here, and they shared with us what they were doing and invited us to come anytime that we wanted to be with them. So I was like, well, what if we go? We have an open opportunity, open door there. And immediately it was like, yep, okay, what's the cost? What's the dates? What's everything? We're going. And what stands out so much about that willingness to go was the purpose was known. The purpose was we have to take our fire out because that's a commandment. And actually where we went was was secondary to that. And I think that is such in line with what the Lord is speaking here, that we're just going to go. And if I had said, okay, we're going to Katy, they probably would have been like, all right, let's go, load up the van. We're going to Katy, because the word of the Lord was to bring fire. So we're bringing fire to Pittsburgh. So if anyone wants to come on that trip too, let me know, because it's going to be fun. To do the will of the one who sent him, we can keep going. That one is like all-encompassing. It's like all of these things are like what we're sent to do. So the blind will see, and those who see will be blind. This one's so funny because you'd have to think about it, like, why did Jesus want to make those who already see be blind? And I think it's like this call to confound the world with the way that we love and the way that we do things. And it is even another thing that's just like, man, take the pressure off, because you're not called to make them see. You're called to make them confused. You're called to live in this way that they're like, what is wrong with you? What are you doing? And a lot of times we're like, we got to know exactly how to pitch the gospel so that they're ready to receive it and change everything. We're actually supposed to just live in this way that people go, I don't get you. You're kind of weird. And then they get curious about that. As a light, so no one who believes should stay in darkness. This one is everywhere, anywhere, no matter who you are, no matter what age you are, no matter what place you are in your walk with Jesus, you're called to be a light. And then we already talked about to have it more abundantly a little bit, but I heard a sermon one time that talked about if you have a ministry of hope, you will never not have something to do. It will never be unsuccessful. If your ministry is a ministry of hope, because the world is looking for that. Everyone in the world is looking for hope. And if you're ministering that out, no matter how you're doing it, no matter what your outlet is or your platform is for it, if you have a ministry of hope in your home, if you're the house in the neighborhood that's like, hey, you can come over after school and it's a safe space where we speak life and we speak hope, you have a full-time ministry. You can do that everywhere. And when we talk about bringing life and life more abundantly, my heart stirs with hope. It's like we get to tell the world, hey, you're going to have an abundant life. You're going to know Jesus. And then to save the world, this one I feel like was so important to end on and come back to, because I don't want that anything I'm saying to diminish the call on anyone's life and it to feel like, okay, you're not supposed to have this big ministry. You're not supposed to do these things that you're called to, or it's less than. And, I'm talking about these things that are very simple and like we could all go out and do right now today. But I don't want that in any way to diminish the calling that's on your life, because when you do those things, you're saving the world. You're on mission. You're in purpose. And there's a story I read the other day, and I keep thinking about it. It was from this girl who does a lot of hiking and backpacking and wilderness stuff, and she wrote a story about a time that she was on this hike, and it was a very rigorous hike. It was like the distance of a marathon and all uphill and like high altitude, and it was like very, very challenging hike. And she was hiking with all of these other very experienced hikers, and they're going up, and she just got to this point where she was like, I have to take a break. And you hate to be the one who's like, I gotta tap out. Like, it has to be me. Like, you're always hoping somebody else will do it and you can take a break. But she had to be the one to be like, I just can't anymore. And the guy who was the group leader for the hike was like, well, we don't stop till we summit. And he keeps going, and he's like charging ahead. And then this older man comes up behind her who had done like these crazy, insane hikes. Like, she's like, he could have run up the mountain and come back and like run around us a couple times and then still beat us to the top. And he came up behind her and he just put his hand on her shoulder and he said, well, we actually can sit here too if you want. So they sit down. And he pulls out 2 energy bars, and he hands her one, and he said, I usually save these for the top, but right now we're just as worthy. I was like, that's the gospel. That's amazing. That's Jesus to say, you know what? This is for the top, but right now we're just as worthy. We can eat this right here and be restored right here. And it was awesome because it was one of those stories where it's like, this is not a Christian writing this story. She doesn't know Jesus, but that truth is there, that when we know we're enough, we feel loved, we feel accepted, and we're able to keep going from that point. And I wanted that to be what people hear from this message today, is that what you're doing is enough. Where you are is enough. You're just as worthy right now, because even if you haven't fulfilled every word that's been spoken over you, or every passion that you have hasn't manifested in some huge ministry or some big business or anything like that looks to the world successful, you're just as worthy right now to be called by God and to be accepted by God and to receive his rewards. And I love this church so much. I don't know how to tell you guys how much I love y'all, but I think that there is such an eagerness in this church to be used by God. There is not a restraint. It's like the most beautiful atmosphere. I don't know if anyone else has ever felt this before, but almost every Sunday in worship, I'm like, nobody's resisting God. I don't feel that. I never feel like there's this group of people in the church that are sitting here like, I don't want to engage. And when we sang this morning, we sang, I want to burn for you. That's when we all got excited. We were like, refine us. We want to burn for you, because that's the heart that's in this church is God, like, we're ready. We want to go. We want to be used by you. There's such an excitement to that. I told Pastor John this morning, I was like, I'm going to need you to wrap it up because I don't know how I'm ending this message yet. So I may just hand off to you. And I'm still going to do that. But I thought it was funny because in worship, I was like, that's because there's not a call in this message. The Lord isn't speaking this morning something that's like, so now repent of this, or now change this, or now go out and do this. There's not an activation point in it. And even like, I always want that. I'm always looking for that. So what do I do with this? And I feel like the Lord's saying, you accept that you're enough. You accept that I see you as fulfilling your purpose because I know that you're being a light. And I know that you are giving up your life and you're crying out, Lord, I want to burn for you. And that was what Jesus came to do. And we're saying we want to do that, and the Lord is so pleased with that. And I think that if we would just get like a little perspective, we would see like the Lord's delight in us. And I know we're not perfect. We're not perfect, but I think we're really beautiful. And I think the Lord really loves us and is really excited about what we're doing here. The other day I met with this guy who wanted to start some mission stuff at his church and was just saying like, we don't do a lot of mission stuff, so I'd like to talk to you about what we could do. And so he's like, how do you do it? And I was like, how do we do what? How do you do missions? I was like, well, like, what do y'all, like, what's on your heart? Do you have anything? And he's like, yeah, I've got some things. And I asked him like what were some ideas. And I was trying to just like pull some stuff out, and he kept just asking like what we should do, what they should do. And then he shared this like almost entire vision with me of a ministry idea that he had. And he's like, so how do I do that? I was like, you just told me all of the steps. Like, you just went through an entire ministry plan, and you just have to do it. Like, you just have to go knock on the door, the first door, and see if it opens up. And I think a lot of times that's something that's going on in our hearts is we actually already know. And we're looking for someone to say, okay, go and do it. Because that's when we feel like we've fulfilled our calling, is when someone gives us title or platform or a plan or just says, you're going to be able to do it, because we're not sure that we're able to do it. But in our hearts, we actually already know what the Lord is asking us to do. And so this morning, I think like what I want from this like last few minutes is just for us to ask the Lord to speak that just a little bit louder, what he's already been speaking in our hearts. And know that it's enough. Know that we're fulfilling our purpose with that. We're not just doing something until we get to the next thing. Not every season is a training season for a bigger and more important season. Where you are right now is your life. Your life doesn't start at some other point down the road. It starts right now, and you being enough and you being fulfilling the calling that the Lord has on your life. To preach, to go and to preach, to heal, to bring fire, to save the world. And I know that seems huge and maybe like too big in some ways, but I think the Lord's like heart is that it's not big enough unless we really believe it, or we really walk into that. So I'm going to pray for us, and Pastor John can come up here and share his words and his thoughts with you. Father, I thank you so much for this body and just the delight that they are to you, Jesus. I thank you so much for the way that you allow us to walk with you and serve with you. And Father, I just thank you for how pleased you are with us. And God, we know we come before you humbly. We know we're not perfect, and we have so much that we want you to change and grow in our hearts, Jesus. But we don't want to wait another day to be walking in step with you and to be the light that you've called us to be here. Jesus, I just pray that you light in every single one of us, Father, the ministry of hope that you have for us to carry out to the lost and to the sick and to the blind. And then, Father, as you light that inside of us, I ask that we would just carry it with humility, that we would carry it with grace and with joy, and we would carry it without comparison, Lord, to anyone else's calling or purpose or destiny. That, Jesus, we would just know when we wake up in the morning and we choose to be a light that we're fulfilling our calling. And we love the sinner, Jesus, we're fulfilling our calling. When we break off generational curses, we're fulfilling our calling, Jesus. Yeah, God, we just pray again this morning. We want to burn for you with that light that's here to save the world. And I hear the Lord just saying that, like, we're going to be a part of things that have mission statements. We're going to be a part of things that are certain types of ministry, and that's okay. But individually, we're not called to be our own church, our own organization. Individually, we're called to just fulfill that commission to be a light. And as a body, we accomplish everything else. And I also just felt like the Lord wanting to say as well, like, this isn't a message about identity at all. No matter if you even do those things, your identity is still in Christ. You're still a son, you're still a daughter, and that's like, you can't wash that off. But I know that there is an anxiety and a desire in our heart that's crying out, God, use me. Father, I just pray right now into every place in everyone's heart, Jesus, that has asked for you to use the vessel that you created. Lord, I just ask that you speak to those places in the heart that has wondered if they don't have anything to offer. And ask for a reminder, Jesus, that you are using them, you're working through them, and you're proud of them for everything that they've done, Jesus.